It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with my co-host Barnet Bain here on KKZZ 1400 AM. Hey, Barnet.
Your co-host, huh?
I can't speak today.
Nice.
Years of professional training.
I can see that.
Hey, listen.
All that acting and all
I
of
know.
those,
What do you do?
all of those classes and all of that elocution.
My diction teacher is rolling around. You know, it's a funny thing because one of the exercises was to do it all with a pencil in my mouth.
We'll
So
try it again with the pencil in your mouth, with the knitting needle.
To be or not to be with to be or not.
That.
Yeah, with the
right.
pencil in my mouth.
That's right.
Hey, listen.
We're just trying to say good morning to the folks, that's all.
That's it. I wanted to welcome you back from Atlantis. I know that you...
I was in Atlantis.
That's fantastic.
How weird is that?
Well, I think the best part about it is you were there because of this new movie you're working on, the new script, I should say, because at this point it's in its script form. I want to talk a little bit about this script because I've read many of your scripts. Of course, this one I haven't because it isn't hashed out yet. But just in our conversations, I'm really excited because it's such a... Oh, how do I use words? It is this conversation we've been having for a year and a half, put into images and into a storyline. And I love the tale, if you will, that at one time, can you believe people confused, that people didn't get the connection between outer reality and inner reality.
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time.
As the little girl says.
Yeah.
People thought that the outer world and the inner world were separate places.
That's fantastic.
Listen, folks, it's just a movie. Don't get all upset on me.
Right. Don't throw rocks.
So the backdrop of this, the what if, it's a movie. What if we're living in the end days, what if, of a causality construct that is Cartesian, Newtonian, Darwinian. The present is the result of the past. Cause leads to effect. So what if, the movie posits, what if there's another order of causation, that the present is the result of the future set against the backdrop of the past as a departure point for storytelling. What if?
It's great.
So to have that discussion
in Atlantis,
in a and to have this, invited to this meeting out in Atlantis.
Which, for those of you who don't know, we sort of assume everyone
and
knows that this is a playground of sorts in the Bahamas. And so Barnet flew
Oh, it's not the real deal?
Barnet flew to
I thought it was some
Bahamas.
platonic thing. I thought it was the real deal.
Well, stay with that thought.
All
You go
right,
with
I
your
like it better.
interpretation. So, except the slide. I heard that you were on the
I
slide.
did the slide.
Yeah. What
I
did
did the
Sandy
slide.
think of that?
She was impressed.
I would have been too.
She was impressed. I did that in part because I can remember reading someplace that you claimed that you would pay good money to see me square dance or
Dance,
something.
yeah.
So-
No, African dance.
African dance. So I thought, what would that be worth if
Yeah,
I
that's
went
right.
down that slide?
See, I should have
and
bought you a cup of coffee. We
had
went to coffee this
chlorinated
morning.
water supercharged through my sinuses and come out my eyes. 'Cause people actually
That's
line
where
up
the buck.
to,
That's
they
where
line
the
up
bucket
to do that.
Yeah, they pay money to do it.
It's unreal.
That's incredible.
It's unreal.
So-
Anyway, it is nice to be back.
Yeah.
Very nice to be back. And the Bahamas was beautiful.
Good.
I've been invited to speak next year about creativity at the Bahamas Film Festival. So that'll be lovely. I'll get a return to Atlantis.
Return to
Wow.
Atlantis to talk about creativity from this perspective. It's just a movie, of course.
It's only a movie.
Yeah, that's right. But
Well, what if? Who
Yeah,
knows?
what if? Who knows?
Just saying.
Just saying. Hey, listen, we've got a pretty interesting guest today.
Who's this guy we have here?
Well, he's a friend of
Who
mine.
is this guy?
And for those of you who used to watch the Freeman Michaels show, you may recognize him because he's been on several times to that show. First time on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
I just want to say, I want to interrupt that. The first time that I became aware of our guest, I saw his quite wonderful TED Talk.
Yes, fantastic TED Talk.
His completely memorable TED Talk, and anybody that can do a TED Talk in a red suit
That's
and a
right.
bolo tie.
Well, you wore the bolo
and
for us
come
today.
out of the other end still commanding respect.
That's fantastic.
Deserves.
Mark Robert Waldman joins us. He's the adjunct professor at Loyola Marymount University here in Los Angeles, and he is also an associate fellow at the Center for Spirituality and the Mind at the University of Pennsylvania. He is a personal development coach. He is the author of 12 books on neuroscience and communication, including the best-selling book, How God Changes the Brain.
Good book.
We both enjoyed that immensely, which, according to Time, Newsweek, and The Washington Post, he and Andy Newberg, his co-author on that book, are considered the world's leading authorities on spirituality and the brain. His research has been featured in Time, Oprah Magazine, New York Times, Washington Post, and USA Today, just to name a few. He's appeared on Oprah Radio, PBS, Canadian National Television, National Public Radio, and on and on and on. He is working on a new book, Words Can Change Your Brain. We just got a peek at that today, which will be released next June. And it's a thrill, Mark, to have you back, or here for the first time, I should say. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful psychedelic
To have you back
experience.
for the first time.
Back for the first time.
Back again for the first time. Sounds like Atlantis again.
Well, like you were saying earlier, what if there is no such thing as an inner and outer reality?
What if?
And our neuroscientific research comes up with even a more outrageous possibility that we're so trapped in the fantasy, imaginary realms of our own inner consciousness that we're extraordinarily lucky if we even get a 1-second peek of an outer reality that may or may not even exist.
An outer reality. Well, here on this program,
It's just a program. It's just a movie.
It's just a movie. Yeah, I mean, we don't make too much
thought.
of a distinction of an outer. So we're singing the same song here. I mean,
Yes,
outer, inner.
yes.
It's consciousness. It's
Most people believe that there is an outer reality.
They do.
Neuroscience
They do.
shows that there's no evidence that we can be in touch with it. We assume it's actually there, but we don't know it. There's no color in the world, but we all see color. How is that possible?
They do. They do. There's a whole lot of ground that we want to cover here with you today.
Yeah.
So
Fire
let's
away.
jump in. I mean, there's so much that stimulates in me. I am very intrigued by paradox. I'm looking back and forth here because the camera is over here, and I don't want to put my back to people, so we should really be in a two-shot, but that's the filmmaker.
There he is.
And
the filmmaker's here in a radio studio
So-
complaining about the film.
I'm so intrigued by paradox. Here's why. I suspect that paradox, and Freeman and I have discussed this frequently on this air. We suspect that paradox is a developmental aptitude, and that the ability to hold paradox is a higher order capacity. Now I would love to see some fMRIs or some sort of metric to evaluate or even to suggest that there is something interesting in terms of neuroplasticity going on when one holds paradox. And there is.
It already
I
is.
knew
It already is.
I knew you were
You
here for
brought the right guy.
I knew we had him here for a good
There you
reason.
Can I give you one of the most fascinating new paradoxes that come up?
Yeah.
Since everybody's brain functions differently, you can't just do one brain scan and say, this is what's going on in that person's brain. You have to do 2 brain scans. And the first one is called a resting state. So you're supposed to lie there and basically do nothing. Just clear your mind and be quiet. Here is a big paradox. It turns out that when you think you are not thinking at all, when you are relaxed, your brain is far more active than when you're doing any other activity in the world. That's a paradox.
Yes. Now, when it's active, you're talking about it being dynamically functional, and it is active in what way?
In every way possible. You've got visions going on. You have thoughts incessantly going on. You have feelings. You have motivational.
Beliefs, choices, attitudes,
All of that.
decisions.
All
So
that.
there's a whole lot of neuronal activity going on.
Related to all that. And you don't have a clue that that's happening because you think you're relaxed and calm and serene.
So that is an experience of paradox. But now I want to suggest, I want to invite you into sort of an imaginary experiment. So here's the imaginary experiment. We design right now a paradox. Let's imagine, here's something else that we've done in this show before. I hope this. So this pen is revolving.
You're holding up a revolving pen.
On its point. Imagine that's you. And you're spinning, spinning, spinning. And now from the waist, without stopping the spinning, I want you to then, on the meridian axis, to tumble.
Oh, it's
and
already looking
hold
like
those simultaneously. What is going... That is such... The mind just goes ape nuts on that. What is going on there?
What do you suspect is going on neurochemically?
What do you suspect might be going on, yeah.
Here's what we think is going on. If you are actually in touch with the inner consciousness of your brain, you would feel like you are taking every fast ride at Magic Mountain simultaneous. You'd probably come off of that experience of glimpsing into your own consciousness and go throw up because of how nauseatingly fast it is.
I do this as a matter of regular practice. I don't throw up, but I do have quite extraordinary experiences that don't need to be the subject of this program. I'm more interested in having in exploring if there might be some sort of correlate in terms of brain activity that is a virgin set of wiring going on. I'm guessing, and we've discussed this a lot, that be at the boundary of logic and reason. The imagination does not stop at the boundary of logic and reason.
That's correct. And
But
there's scientific
control
evidence
does.
for that.
Control, the ego certainly stops there, and control stops there. And
Yes.
our egos say, well, what value could this possibly have if it can't be
Exactly.
measured, monitored, if there's no
Monetized.
Monetized.
Measured, monetized.
But there's no vacuum. As a creative person, I understand that there is no vacuum. And creativity does not allow for a vacuum. So if there is a capacity, then there is a function happening there, and a form will emerge out of that function. And this is all completely anecdotal. But I'm wondering,
it's experiential.
It's
From your
experiential.
experience working in the arts and crafts that you do with film and so forth, you've come to understand that as we peel away some of the constructs and we enter this sort of space of, let's call it mystery. And actually it's interesting because it's very similar, Mark, to what you're talking about in that sort of rested state where there's all manner of possibility, and where in that state what you're saying is there's a whole lot of firing going on versus when we lock into a kind of structured thinking, whether it's structured imagination. We've talked about this a lot on this show. You don't know this, but where what we call imagination often is simply repurposing other people's movies, other people's ideas. It's not really on the edge.
I want to add something to what you're saying, though.
Go ahead.
Something critical. So, Mark, you talked about this. There's a lot of activity that's going on when you're seemingly in a restive state, but it is default activity.
It is not default activity.
It's where we go to by default. It is the default brain.
No.
It's not.
No, it's not.
How not so?
This is the interesting thing. I mean, like the way in which we're having our conversation now, and for every listener who is out there, you have to be extremely focused or you're going to drive off the freeway or we're going to fall off of our chairs. When we're in a resting state, in fact, you've really tapped into your imagination, your creativity, your highest potential is all sitting there. The paradox is this. You're lying there and your consciousness is saying nothing is going on when in fact you're already halfway into the most conscious, creative, imaginative place.
Imagine there's a line. Imagine there's this big funnel here. Funnel. Imagine there's a big and halfway
cattywampus funnel I've ever seen in my life.
It's a little painful. Halfway through, somewhere along the somewhere in the body of that funnel, there's a line. Below the line, above the line, the widest part of the funnel, we are not conscious of of brain activity. We're not conscious of anything. Beautiful funnel, Mark. is
He's
drawing
a
for us
much better
here.
funnel drawer.
Love that. Beautiful funnel we have from Mark. So above that line, we're not conscious of what is going on. However, the paradox is there is more possibility.
That's
the
it.
broadest possibility exists in the area of the funnel of which we're not conscious. As we go closer down towards the squishy part, our possibilities, the broadness of our possibilities become
Narrow.
reduced to
Yeah.
probabilities, and by the time we get to the squishy bottom part,
It's pretty predictable.
we are well within our control, our ego control. And we start with like Niagara and we end up with a drip from the faucet.
So let me turn all that into neurobabble.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who are actually
From spiritual babble into neural babble. That's going to be an improvement.
Well, that's his job.
I know.
We
that's
called
my
the right
job. That's why
guy.
he's here.
So I don't know what you can
Point that
see in
to a
this
camera,
particular
right.
camera or whatever else, but if you can't see this, all I want you to do is to imagine a funnel and an upside down pyramid with a point pointing down
Yeah.
and the widest part on top. When you are in your resting state and where everyday consciousness is in that little tiny point at the bottom of that
The
period.
squishy part.
The squishy part. And when you're resting, all of the rest of that consciousness is shooting on. It's doing wonderful stuff inside of your brain, but you have chosen not to be aware of it.
Right.
So the resting state brings you out of all of the neurobabble that's already going on in your head.
You're saying you have chosen. We're suggesting that at some point it is beyond our ability to choose, that we do not have the capacity to be conscious beyond certain levels of functioning.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
You're saying we have total ability to be conscious of our
Yes.
subconscious and of our unconscious.
Yes.
Potentially.
Yes.
Potentially.
No,
Potentially.
I'm not saying potentially.
Okay.
I'll go online. You can take away my university degrees if this is not true. It's all there.
I wouldn't know
all
where
you
to
have
put
to
them.
do tap it.
That's right.
I could make a suggestion, but this is a family show.
Well put, Mark.
So this is good. So you're saying we have absolute capacity right now to be
Yes.
fully realized.
Everybody does. As a matter of fact,
Not as potential, but as as a practical matter, we
You're
can
born
know
with it.
all of.
you're born with it. And if you stay in touch with all of those realms of consciousness, you will grow up and the rest of the world will see you as being either schizophrenic or autistic or something along that line. You've got too much creativity coming in too much. You have too much neuroplasticity going on. Connections are firing in the brain. I can show you film of actually showing neurons. They connect and disconnect over a matter of minutes. Over hours, they reconnect in ways you
So-
don't have the same thought twice.
You're saying people will perceive you as that, but as experientially, will you perceive yourself as sane?
No.
All right. So the
So
distinction
everything-
that we're making here.
So you want to throw away all of that consciousness that's there, all that spirituality that's there, all of that creativity that's there. You have to throw it away and focus in very narrowly to a little tiny piece of reality so that you can sanely just
Where's your show
learn
and
how to
tell
open up your
diagram?
door.
Okay. So I love what you're saying. Now, what we're suggesting here, a little over the shoulder shot.
Yeah, I like it.
What we're suggesting is that there may be practices and the holding and the development of the capacity to hold paradox.
Not maybe, there are.
Okay,
There are, for
great.
sure.
This is
Practices
what
agree
we've
with you.
proven.
that enable us
To move up the line.
to move up the line without going mad.
That's what we've proven.
That's it.
There we go.
There we
and
go.
what are those practices?
The first thing is you have to go into that resting state.
We're talking about meditation.
No, we're just talking about relaxing
Okay.
to start out with.
Okay, fair enough.
Yawn. Oh, stretch a little bit. I mean, all of this kind of will take you right out of this particular moment. You're going to forget about everything that's actually happening.
Okay, now,
if you
but
take a moment.
with full respect for your work, we want you to go now off the trail
Okay.
and explore something completely new with us.
Well, give me
Because
30 seconds.
you're right about the yawn, and our viewer. We've talked on this show. We've repped
I
the
don't want
yawning.
the yawn. I want to tell you what to do next so that you can tap back into that crazy neuroplasticity where all of that creativity is that you have.
Hit us with it.
automatically.
Hit us with it.
Yeah.
Then
So
we're
that
going to talk
everybody
about
else out
paradox.
there who doesn't do that can
Hit
do
us with
that.
it.
So all you do is in that relaxation state, then turn your attention on to all of the inner noise and creativity that's going on. Just sit back and watch it, and the show will begin to unfold like the most wild movie you've ever
Got
seen.
it. Okay,
That's
now
called
we want to
meditation.
talk about paradox.
Yes.
So
Well, before we do that, we have to take a commercial
we got to
break
take
because we have to pay
Then
bills.
we're going to come back. We're going to talk about
When
paradox.
we get back, we're going to jump right back in to Paradox here with Barnet Bain, my partner, and our friend
guest.
Mark Robert Waldman. Stay with us. We'll be right back here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with my co-host Barnet Bain. Today we're talking to Mark Robert Waldman, the author of many books, including How God Changes the Brain and the soon-to-be released book, Words Can Change Your Brain. And before we went to break, Barnet, you were gently nudging Mark towards the conversation of paradox, because I think what you're going to allude to here is there might be the opportunity to practice a kind of awareness. And I think actually, Mark, you're talking about this, where we allow for more dynamic complexity. We allow for threads of thoughts to be going on at the same time without attaching too tightly to any particular one.
Yes, exactly.
And that freeing up.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay, then
I'm talking very specifically about holding two or more ideas and actions, which
seemingly
neuroscientists have tell us is absolutely impossible to do. You can only do. Okay, well, I'm only saying
it's almost impossible just to have one idea.
But I'm just going to give credit to. I'm just going to acknowledge a lot of the conventional wisdom.
Okay.
I also challenge that. I dare to challenge that. But I want to acknowledge that the conventional wisdom is that we can only hold one thought at a time consciously in our conscious awareness. And what I want to suggest that's true too. Yes. So that already is a paradox.
That's everyday consciousness.
So I want to suggest that we do have experiences every day that are beyond logic and reason.
Every minute.
Well, go with me for a sec. We have experiences every day that are beyond logic and reason, peak moments that are, and I believe that these are portals of communication to aspects of ourselves be above the waterline of our conscious awareness.
Yes.
And that we experience them as beauty and as connection. We experience them in the timelessness.
Yes.
Outside of time, outside of space, outside of logic, outside of reason.
Yes.
This is great. We're doing good so far. So now here's the piece that we are hoping that you are going to be able to fill in for us.
Maybe.
No, we want it.
Then yes.
So
there are no limits. Yes.
We talked about a while back ago on this show. We had a whole show about beauty.
Yes.
And we realized that beauty, the experience of beauty, is the net result of two separate frequencies. One of exuberance. It's the idea of exuberance. And it's the idea of serenity.
Yes.
And simultaneously experienced, they create a harmonic, literally and experientially, called beauty.
Yes.
At the level of form, that's a subjective thing.
Yes.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. At the level of function, it is a paradoxical experience of exuberance and serenity simultaneously.
I agree.
We believe that this kind of experience, fostering beauty, the experience of a sunset, a thoroughbred bolting out of the starting gate, the trick with the pen, that this is fostering a relationship with a capacity to move the line,
Yes.
the water line, up.
Yes.
So that I can foster with intentionality
Yes.
a sane relationship with more of who I really am.
That's it.
Yes.
And we would love to see more than just the anecdotal evidence of artists and painters and creatives and people who live their lives in joy and in bliss. We would love to see a little brain science to support that when I spin and tumble
rotate,
simultaneously, that areas of my brain look like a Christmas tree.
It's already there.
Oh, thank God you're here. Tell us more.
Well, here's the problem. The reason why why nobody knows about this is because it's all in the language of your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and that doesn't mean anything to anybody. So my job is to try to take everything you say and boil it down into an affirmation. So far has been yes, 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 and even more yes. And the one thing I would add to that, though, is that if you spend too much time in that transcendent, inspirational, serene, beautiful, creative place, you'll go crazy if you don't keep coming back to that single pointed consciousness of just everyday awareness, almost boredom. We're sitting here, I'm wearing a coat or whatever. So we are playing always with limiting the neuroplasticity, slowing the brain down so we can just pick up a fork and eat a meal, and then letting it loose wild so we go back into every agony and ecstasy that exists.
But what exactly is happening in the neural web when we are consciously experiencing, when we are consciously developing a yoga of paradox?
A yoga of paradox.
You're learning how to take...
What does it look like? I want to know what, not just learning, not theoretically, what do you suspect that if we had fMRIs going here, that there might be some activity that is new wiring?
We have a good idea where everyday consciousness is in the brain. It's in a little tiny area. And to give you an example of what that would be, let's just take a coliseum and fill that with 100,000 individuals, okay? And then take one of those individuals, have them raise up their hand, look at their fingernail, and then to take a microscope and look at one little tiny dot on their fingernail. That's everyday consciousness. And if you learn how to realize that you've narrowed your focus down to this myopic, microscopic view, you can turn your brain around and look through it like a magnifying glass and discover these 100,000 people, these other 100 million, 100 billion neurons.
That's an interesting metaphor. It's a great metaphor. But I read in one of your books a gorgeous, really gorgeous and inspiring account of a study done of meditators and monks in which who were subjected, I think they were to MRIs, some sort of scan.
Spec scan.
I think they were Franciscan nuns, right?
Yes. There were some studies done, I think, at Penn. I don't know where this was done, but and there was very, very specific activity recorded in the brain.
And no.
Okay.
We got a paradox.
We got the yes part. What's the no part?
The no part is that we still have very primitive things. So when you look at the brain, understand if there's 100 billion neurons and you see a little tiny dot on a brain scan, that's representing millions of neurons going on. So we only have some vague sense of something that's happening in this little tiny galaxy. It's like the whole universe of thoughts and ideas and creativity.
Sure.
And all we're able to see is a galaxy yet. We're not able to see ourselves on this planet or ourselves sitting on that planet. We haven't developed that yet. We just suspect and think and know it's there. So we see huge areas that this is where your creative visualization is coming from, back here in your...
So it's not, what you're saying is it's not definitive, but had it shown up, for instance, in the amygdala, it would be fair to say you were having a nasty you were having some sort of experience of fear.
Depends which part of your amygdala. If your amygdala doesn't get excited at all...
let's not get technical about it. But
no, if it doesn't get excited, you won't wake up. You won't have creativity.
I understand the function of these things. But we're not having...
It's a paradox. It stimulates your amygdala.
Help me out here. We're not trying to have a discussion about physiology or neuroscience. We're trying to have a discussion about what might be happening, not behaviorally, what might be happening in the brain in terms of brain chemistry.
That's behavior.
What it might look like. What kind of metrics we might be able to find that would support something, or that would show that there might even be a possibility.
You'll see that hundreds of neurochemicals are suddenly changing. Different things are being released in different parts of the brain.
And now, would that be a whole new order of wiring and firing, or would that be the same sorts of circuits?
That's the stuff that flows between the wiring and the firing.
Say more about that.
Each time one neuron, which sends out 10,000 little wiggly axons, fires off a bunch of neurochemicals that can be picked up by as many as 10,000 other neurons in different ways, and you never know which neuron that's going to fire and connect to. There's all of this movement of neurochemical activity and emotionality and feeling and sensation and what have you. And it's just connecting and reconnecting all the time. And you'll see that certain areas of the brain, when you enter these exquisite states of consciousness or beauty, certain areas light up more than others. That doesn't happen during your everyday consciousness.
That's great.
I'm ready.
Great.
So I think what we come to is the tremendous opportunity of slowing down the pattern responses that that override our potential. I mean, what I'm gathering, and I sort of said on the outside of this conversation, though I'm very intimate with what, Barnet, you're talking about, because we've discussed it many times, about these states where we open up to where we can consciously begin to, through practices perhaps, expand certain capacities that allow for this perception of beauty, for example, to be activated very readily and almost, I don't want to say at will, because it's not that. It's an opening versus a controlling. You know, that's where we get into another little paradox there. But so that's the conversation we've been having.
You neurologically turn your eyeballs consciously from looking at the outer world, which doesn't really exist, into your inner world, which is so vast, it's mind-blowing.
Right.
So what would happen?
That's awesome.
What would happen, again, what might happen in terms of a scan if we took physically, if we imagined ourselves, imagine rolling your eyes to the roof of your head so you're looking straight up.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I would say imagine just
I'm not
turning your
finished.
eyes inwards.
That's what you'd say, but it's my show.
Okay. I'm gonna
Imagine
look
your
straight
eyes
up.
going
There I go.
straight up to the roof of your head.
Okay.
Now imagine them looking straight out the back of your head.
Okay.
So you're looking at the wall.
Yep.
Now imagine them rolling down, so they're staring straight down your spinal cord.
Yep.
You're looking straight down your spinal cord.
No problem.
What do you think? What do you suspect?
What does that brain scan look
might
like?
be happening on a scan right now?
What
Do you think that
know is happening
Mm-hmm.
is that you've activated your frontal lobes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your executive decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
Up here, where you are normally thinking, is also where all of your imagination is. I didn't actually look backwards. I didn't actually see my spine, but some part of my imagination did, and we know where that takes place, right up here in your frontal lobes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It becomes even more active than when you are lying in that resting state.
So you would see frontal lobe activity
Increases.
increasing.
Consistently, dramatically, and in the same way as certain people do certain types of creative processes or meditation or contemplation processes.
I wonder, has
great.
there been much brain scans of artists when they're in, like, for music?
In the flow, in
we know that.
psychological terms.
Yeah, we know that there is.
Yes and no.
Okay. Because, you know, one of the things we've talked about is
He just loves
technically,
his paradox
I know.
stuff. Yes and no.
But let me finish this thought. Technically, you can take a pianist, for example, two equally technically proficient pianists, and you can have them each play the same piece of music, and yet one of them will, I'm going to use language that's very vernacular. One of them is more, let's say, tapped in a particular way, and there's a very recognizable difference, even though technically they're equal.
Yeah.
And I'm curious.
They've done that. They've done this specific brain scan, and
What the
they've
heck's going
taken incredible.
What did they find?
What they found is that talented musicians, when they do, what do you call it? Playing when you're just doing spontaneous, improvised, really lights up the brain in a very unusual way, and that's what we're thinking is the creative process itself. Now that we can actually see it in a brain scan, we can now develop specific exercises based on an experienced musician or artist and teach other people how to stimulate that same part of their brain.
Bingo. That's
Bingo.
what we got there. We're home.
Okay.
Now that's fantastic. That is what more can you tell us of what those neural maps look like? what are the kinds of protocols that have been applied to that, and what is the kinds of research that
And if
is
you don't
coming
mind,
out
I'm
of
even
that.
even layer in some language that Barnet and I have used. We've called this ultra creativity. That's what we've titled
We call
it.
that ultra
Yeah.
creativity.
In that case, there have been so few brain scans done that even the best of us in this field, we're all speculating. We don't disagree with each other because we don't know if any of us are on the right track or full of BS or what have you. We're just this is the new frontier.
Right.
We're just now looking into the brain, and we finally have figured out a few tiny notions of what creativity might be. So then we have to repeat that so we can see that person is doing this particular creative act and this person does the same creative act, and we get the same part of the brain that lights up. The reason why we may never find the answer to this is because I think, and most of the people in this field who have studied this also think, that creativity is so unique for each individual. It is the unique neural wiring of that brain at that moment, at that second.
But you're
that creates
talking,
a whole
you're
new
talking
universe.
again about physiology. If we go back to the analogy of beauty,
Yes.
the beauty is a frequency, a paradoxical frequency that is greater. It is a synergy of exuberance and serenity.
But that's a nice metaphor. Frequency has no meaning
Well,
in the science world.
Yes, so that's, well, it depends on who you speak to, but we're not going to have that conversation. We're not going to have that
No,
conversation. But,
we want to
but
remain
we,
positive.
But we can have that conversation. No, it would be a wonderful conversation to have. We had Robert O. Williams on last week, and that was
But to use
quite
that,
a-
yes, you have, by the way, you have over 30 or 40 different frequencies going on in your brain that people have been able to measure so far. So alpha, beta, delta, gamma, all of that stuff. That's just the tip of the iceberg of frequencies. And what we find out is that every moment within a creative process, the frequencies are changing. So for each person, it's very different. What we think happens is that you get a unique set of frequencies firing in my brain. I translate that into a painting, a music, a song, an inspirational word. And what happens is called neuroresonance. Your brain will attempt to mirror the activity in my brain, and that's how you experience my creativity.
Wow.
That's
That's
right.
money right there. That's
right.
what we're
That's
looking.
money.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the big payoff to understand the again. I'm this resonant quality where we say things like I resonate with that. I mean, we say it very
And
again.
it's
It's in
literal.
the vernacular, but it's more literal. It really is. There's a way in which
We explain that for the first time in this particular book.
yeah. That's and what you were speaking of course,
Neural
is the new
resonance.
book. Words can change your brain because, of course, you guys are measuring the effect of language and intent behind the language. I think is the critical piece.
How do you communicate what you are experiencing
it.
inside that your words can never touch apart and
Right.
on? And every artist and every creative individual knows that. It doesn't come across in the words. It comes across in the tone of the words, in your facial expression, all of this. But it even happens at a deeper level, a level that is transcendent to all that experience. If you put yourself in that experience and you radiate that sense, let it move all through your whole body, anybody who is looking at you and listening to you, their brain is going to begin to resonate as best as possible. And the more closely you watch and listen to a creative individual or an angry individual or a political individual, the more your brain will fire the way their brain is firing. That's the only word that we have for it. It's called empathy. That's the only way we know what's going on in somebody else's brain that is so unique that there's no two brains that are the same.
And we also call it matching energy, which is a way that we get tapped
Yes.
into someone else's vibe, if you will, and we go on that ride. If in fact it's a place in us that's easily triggered. If
So
it's
we've-
not, then the person just goes right
So we've
past
come
us.
up with 12 evidence-based strategies on how you do that, how you resonate, how you match somebody else's energy, how you get inside of their brain so the two brains become one. And that in itself is the creative process, because we do think that two brains working together create the most incredible beauty, serenity, creativity, imagination in the world.
We're going to have you back
We'll have
for
you
more
back.
of this
We'll have more of
conversation.
this.
I want to, before we let you go, I know you're doing some incredible work. There's a workshop coming up because besides the fact that you work in this field of neuroscience and spirituality, you also, having been the author of 12 books, more if we count the current book coming out, teach people about the writing process. So I definitely want to clue people in to the books that they can pick up, How God Changes the Brain, the new book coming out, Words Can Change Your Mind. I want to give folks the website, Mark Robert Waldman, all spelled out.com is the website. Of course, you can get all of this from the Cutting Edge Consciousness website. And when is this workshop, because this is really interesting as well, on the writing process going to happen? I think in January?
No, it's going to be March 3rd.
March.
Here in Westlake Village in Los Angeles. And it will teach individuals exactly what really goes on in the New York publishing world. We're going to use some of these consciousness-raising exercises to teach people how to become better writers, because our research shows that you have to be able to write well if you want to speak well, and vice versa. You have to bring in all of these language centers of the brain.
And if they mention that they heard about this workshop on cutting edge consciousness, what happens?
What happens? What will happen? Oh, my God. I can't even begin to describe to you the miracles that are going to take place in your creative imagination right now. Whatever you're imagining is going to happen.
That's
Very
beautiful.
nice.
So again, if you want more information on any of the work that Mark Robert Waldman is doing, you can find that on his website, markrobertwaldman.com. And of course, you can find out more on the Cutting Edge Consciousness website. Mark,
And you can stay tuned, because
We'll be right back.
Mark will be right back.
Oh, and
He'll be back in the future, and you and I will be right back. But Mark will be back, and we'll pick up
stay
where
with us
where
and
we've left
keep
off.
coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. We'll be right back. Thanks
Don't
again, Mark.
lose consciousness. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Edge of Possibility here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Back from the edge.
Wow. This is Freeman Michaels here with Barnet
That was
Bain.
exciting.
That was awesome.
That was exciting. That was fast moving. We could have used another couple hours.
Yeah, no kidding. What I think is great, because, of course, you and I have been speculating about where creativity lies and how we achieve it, and sort of, without really recognizing exactly what the process is, to tie all of the brain science that has been done. And obviously, the opportunity to do so much more and research this is extraordinary. But that was really fun to have him come in and sort of confirm stuff that we imagined was probably what was going on neurochemically, but couldn't quite know.
I would love to find some studies, to see some studies, or to become part of the encouragement process for studies to be conducted in this area, so that there is a little bit more incentive to begin to begin to foster creative states. As you and I have discussed often, frequently here, creative states are a birthright of every human being.
Yeah.
And that they have been, the culture has diminished our access. We've been conditioned to believe that creativity is only for artists and painters and writers, and it's sad. I mean, psychologists and scientists have done their part in diminishing our access to creativity. So even, Freud said that all creativity is a response to certain
sexual urges.
Exactly.
God bless Freud.
Certain complexes.
He was working
if
on it.
all creative acts are simply expressions of complexes, then we are nothing more than mediums working out complexes. And while that is certainly true,
sure, of course,
to
on
a
some
certain
level,
a certain extent, it's true. Eventually, there is more.
Yeah.
And so it kind of cuts out creativity. And Jung did it similarly. And Jung said creativity was expressed either by representative art or visionary art. And the visionary art was the expression of archetypal energies. And then once again, we just become, creativity is reduced to just the medium of something that's set. And Maslow said that, well, until your basic needs are met, of safety and security, and then you turn to creativity. And while it might be true that it's really good, you eat before you dance. Maybe if you danced, it might make it a little easier to manifest the eating.
Yeah, of course.
So
this is the dynamic relationship.
Shrinking of creativity has not been a service for people.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the pieces that paradoxically comes into play here is what we've called the sacred I don't know. This allowing for mystery, allowing for I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so, it's interesting that neuroscience can take us, so far, just as, the entire thought system that we have learned, the logic and reason, can take us so far. We honor it for what it's been, but Freud or Maslow or whoever were working with the constrictions of the day, of that
That's right.
developmental
and they were
stage.
At the edge of
they pushed as far as they could.
It up.
That's
yes.
right. But you and I both know that the next phase of human development is beyond where we've come so far, because we're seeing the limitations of this conditioned thinking in our lives as individuals and in the collective, that we see it's that we've hit the upper limits of what's possible coming from this vantage point, and the notion that there's something beyond it, more than a notion, because we've obviously experienced it, and then the question becomes, how do we dwell on that? So it's almost as if we hold, and Mark said this, we hold what we call the reservation, the conditioned reality, in one hand, and we offer that there is this other piece that we have had points of reference for in our lives, moments of inspiration and breakthrough, and wow, what was that about? And as you expressed, the pen, the toying with it, the actual, wow, what is that? I want to go into that more substantially. I want to expand a particular capacity because there's a whole wealth of stuff in there that I want to explore. That's what this show is about. That's what The Edge is. But every time we put it into words, we stumble a little bit because, again, when you bump up against something we're calling mystery, how do you describe that in a particular way? You don't. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. So it is this kind of crazy tension between expanding beyond and coming back and trying to find a frame of reference in something that really can't provide a frame of reference. Sorry about that, folks. But it's true, like I'm operating in this certain belief structure that I know its limitations, and yet my desire is to blow past it, and there's a tension there. Which, of course, we've talked about. So, but he's such an interesting guy, and I do love that book, How God Changes the Brain. I recommend that, to our listeners.
Read it on the plane last night.
Yeah, and of course, I read it. God, last year when I was with my wife in Spain, I read it all through Spain. That was my sort of, other.
I find
dimension.
that scientists, and this was, it was handled in that book, wonderful as it was, handled by omission. When he comes back, when we have Mark another time, we'll discuss this. The relationship that we have to mystery is, of course, what this show is about. And brain scientists don't so much discuss the relationship to mystery as much as they collapse mystery into brain function.
Right.
And it's a bunch of it's a chemical neurological bunch of circuitry that operates on the hypothalamus or the
the prefrontal cortex and whatever.
It's simply, this is located in this area. And on this show, look, we don't know. Is it possible we're living in a delusion? That's very possible. But as Blaise Pascal said many years ago, the heart has its reasons of which the mind knows nothing.
That's it.
And
so we're talking. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
When we collapse a very large funnel into the squishy end of logic and reason, and try and describe mystery or creativity. So it wasn't so much a seeking of description that we're after, as it is any evidence of the shadow of these higher forces showing up in previously uncharted areas of mapping.
And you and I are working on a different criteria of knowing.
Look,
here's a particular illustration. Let's say, for example, someone studies the Vedic tradition, and they, in fact, go on and get a PhD in this, and they've read every book, and they know everything about it from a certain academic vantage point. Do they know more than someone who goes to an ashram, lives the Vedic lifestyle for
They
2
know
or 3 years.
differently. It's
That's
not
my
about
point.
more.
So it's a different. That's what I mean to say. It's a different kind of knowing. That it's great to have a PhD in the Vedic tradition. It is another thing to go and live it and have an experience of it that's personalized. It may not be in a historical context. It may not be in a whatever the vantage point of the PhD
And
is.
one or the other may or may not be a more empowered perspective, and that is per the individual.
There's different criteria for knowing is all we're saying. So it's great to have a scientific perspective. It is wonderful to have a doctor, a PhD, or an MD or whatever come in and relay, the conventional notions and some alternative ideas and yada, yada, yada. It's another thing to go into the heart of the matter in a very visceral, very experiential, very somatic way and have a whole different vibrational experience and go, whoa, we know something different. I shouldn't make it better or worse, and I don't think it is. I think it's just another kind of knowing. And that, of course, is the work here, is that we've got a whole different criteria, another way of knowing things. And when it comes to the mystery, we don't know.
We don't know the mystery, but we know the reservation.
Yeah.
I think we know the round and round the mulberry bush. We know the merry-go-round of if then, and if anything, that beautiful wisdom of Pascal's is that when we reduce the broad end of the funnel into the squishy end of what the mind can handle, then we have, as we said earlier, from the whatever the mystery is, it's whatever that cosmic experience is of Niagara. By the time it has been crunched by our structured imagining, it's a drop from the faucet.
And we also know that we've run out of time.
With
that,
we'll be back.
We will be back. So please keep tuning in and please keep coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Thanks for listening.